We will now create our own patterns in the brush palette in Illustrator. I click on my space bar, my tool turns into a hand, so that's always really nice. We will be drawing objects. I'm going to click with my black arrow on these patterns I have done previously, but we're going to be creating objects like this. All right, so what you see before us, right? So you see some stripes, little checkerboards, stuff like that. Before I start, I would like to say though that you can also, I'm going to click on one of my, this is from the library. If I click on my brush palette and drag this stuff out, there you go, you get your patterns there. You click on one pattern, I'm in my black arrow, all right? I right click and I can ungroup this. So now I'm using my pattern brush as a library. So that is really cool. All right, so keep that in mind. That's a very lovely thing. For example, here's some stripes that I had done before. Whoops. Command Z is undo, Command Shift Z is redo, but I click on this pattern, drag it out. There's my stuff, and these are the corner boxes, so, you know, but I click on any of these, I'm in my black arrow. Not sure if it defaults that, but I hit ungroup, that's the main thing, and now I can use these as patterns. I could even take this pattern here and drag it back in again, right? I'll click on new pattern brush, because this is the stuff we're going to be doing. You know, we're going to create a pattern, right? And again, in your free time, see right, it says scatter brush. That just means I draw a line, this will scatter all over the place. Okay, if you go to art brush, I'll cover that later, but click on art brush, draw a line, and click on it. I never used art brush or scatter brush. So anyway, we want pattern brush, so this is what we're going to be doing a number of times. Right, here's my pattern, just like what we dealt with before. It's saying, oh, here on this corner box, you got to decide, right, this little corner here. So I click on it. Auto center is usually what you want. Auto overlap, but I click there, so now I have something. As I said before, yeah, I could create my own box and put it there. So I create my artwork, I do sharp lines, and then I want it to be exactly what I want. Then you create a little box and just put it there. Okay, so, but I just chose that because it doesn't matter. All right, I can click on this line here that was pre-done already, but here's this. All right, so that's all from a pattern that I already created. All right, so now what we will do is I'm going to hit Command apostrophe because it's good to have a grid. View show grid or snap to grid. View snap to grid. Keep in mind Command apostrophe, which is right next to your apostrophe is right next to your return key. You know, it's the shortcut. You don't want to use the menu. You do want snap to grid on because that is just very important when you're creating repeating patterns. Usually you want the left side of your pattern to be the same as your right side. Okay, you can see that on the X's, on this oval, on these lines here. All right, you don't always have to do it that way, but you know, that's if you want to match all the way across. All right, there's also preferences. You have preferences at the top of your screen right here, preferences, so that's nice. Or I could hit Command K. That's what I'm used to doing. In the past classes, I had set my keyboard increment to 1 inch. I don't want to do that anymore, so I'm going to type in 0.0139. Okay, so that's a good number. That's probably where yours is already at a default at. If I want my keyboard increments to be really small, just add a 0 here. Okay, and the keyboard increments are the up, down, and side arrows on your keyboard on the lower part right side. All right, so I remember keyboard increments like that. You know, that's not really part of this creating patterns and stuff. But I'm going to go to Smart Guides. My color of my grid is blue. That's how I like it. All right, you can do whatever you want. 1 inch with 32 subdivisions. 32 subdivisions is the amount of these little light blue lines in between the darker blue lines. And this is all 1 inch. Command R gets you to your rulers. You can see those are at the top of my screen. There's 11, here's 11 and a half. Okay, so you can always change your grid size to whatever you want. I'm at 1 inch. All right, grid and back is not checked down because normally if I bring in an image, and then I want to draw over it, I want to see the grid. All right, so that's nice and simple. Usually you're going to hit Command plus a number of times because you want to be really close to your screen. Space bar with my left hand, then click on the screen to move my stuff around. We're going to draw some patterns. I'm going to have my stroke in front. Maybe I'll make it black so you can easily see it. I have snap to grid on. View snap to grid, that's very important. My stroke set at 1. Maybe I'll make it skinnier, 0.5. I'm working small. I'm going to be in my pen tool. You can do this with any tool as usual, but here's an X. So I'm in my pen tool and I just click, there's an X. So there's one line of the X. I held Command, click away, deselect, and then I click here and here. See, this is why you want snap to grid on. And then I hit Command, so my tool turns into an arrow. Click away, deselect. Now I lift up and it's back into a pen tool. So that's how you draw really quickly. So I created that object. Now what I'm going to do is click and drag down. I will click on my oval tool, my ellipse tool, and I can click and drag. If you hold down Shift, you have a perfect circle. If you don't, you have an oval. So there's an oval. And what I can do is put a color into it. I'll make it blue. There you go. Maybe I want to duplicate this oval, so I select it with the black arrow. I hold on Option, click and drag. So I'm dragging it down. And then I take my lasso tool. There's 4 anchor boxes. They're all dark, which means everything's selected. Click away, deselect. Even though you don't have to click away. But I select this one anchor box. There's 4 anchor boxes. There's my anchor boxes. There's my control arrows. The white anchor boxes means it's not selected. All right, so if I hit delete, right, you can see I created half of an object. So you can do this all over the place. If you're in fashion, you might be calling that a scallop. All right, so there's 3 objects. Before I go any further, I'm going to select the oval and I just drag it into my brush palette. Click on Pattern Brush, click OK. Okay, again, it wants me to do something here in that inner circle. Not sure why it always does that. It should just choose something, and I'm surprised, but all right, I'll click on Auto Overlap. In this case, I probably would have drawn the oval. And again, it doesn't matter if you're doing a smooth line. This just means if you're doing a sharp corner, you're going to have a circle looking like that. Keep in mind you have tints and shades, and hue shift. You know you're going to be changing things. It's 2 color. So the blue color is what will change when I go to hue shift or tints and shades. All right, I'm going to click OK. Again, I'll just leave all these things the same. You've already seen that stuff. All right, I will do it with the X. I take my black arrow, just like I was in my black arrow with the oval, and I will have to click on the black line of my X or else it won't select. I drag it in. You can see I've done this before. It's invisible until you release your mouse. You have to make sure you drag it into your palette, right? Release the mouse. Make sure you click on Pattern Brush. All right. If you don't, it'll go in the other brush areas, and feel free to experiment with that. Maybe you'll come up with something cool. All right, I want auto slice. Okay, so that's where I'm just trying to give me a normal X there. That's fine. And just because, I'll just click on here. I drag this in, new pattern brush, click OK. Again, I'm dragging it into the brush palette. I'll try to come up with something here unless I don't. Maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want it to look like this. All right, auto center is usually something good. I'll click on auto center. Who knows? All right, I click OK. All right, I'm going to create double stitches, or they could just be dotted lines. So I click with my pen tool. I hold down Command, click away, deselect. But I drew, and again I have snap to grid on, but Command, click away, deselect, and then I'm going to click again and click, and I have 2 equal lines. I take my black arrow, I click on my 2 lines to select them. I will have my weight's 0.5, could be whatever you want, but I click on dash lines. There you go, where it says dash 12. You might want to change it to 2 or 3. I changed my dash to 2, I changed my gap to 1, so those are common stitches, but you can feel free to click all the way across, add dashes and gaps, do whatever you want. I click on this, I drag it in. Again, it didn't work that time, so I'm in my black arrow. Make sure you click on one of the black lines or it's not going to do it. It's invisible, but I see a plus sign. Click on pattern brush, click OK. I'll just put something in here, right? I'll click on auto in between. So again, auto is usually your magic wand. I will hit Command minus, minimize my screen. I will hit Command apostrophe just to hide my stuff, so you can see it better. Space bar with my left hand to go to a free area. And you want to draw a nice long line, or use your brush, right? So I draw it more freestyle. All right, use any tool. See there, it was set to the stitches. Now I click on this tool. I don't know why, mine's deselecting. That's not supposed to happen, but I select it. There's my ovals, there's X's, there's this. Okay, click on this one. All right, so whatever I click on. Now this is showing up like this. I'm going to double click on this. I click OK, but I'm going to draw a straight line. I'll use my line tool. You can use any tool. I'll draw a straight line. I click on it. That definitely is unusual. Okay, so you notice when I draw the line, all right, it looks very ovally like this. So you can see that this pattern is what's selected. So I double click on it. If I play around with the scale at the very top, I'll bring it way down to the left. You can see it takes on the normal pattern shape. And if I make it really small, look at what happens. I'll make it really big, and it's a big mess. All right, so there's different looks. If I want to just change one of them, again, I would select one of these objects and just change the stroke. So that's how you change one of them. Also, where it says fit, there's stretch to fit. Play around with add space to fit. All right, so that's kind of cool. Approximate path, you know, that's very similar in this case to stretch to fit. All right, add space to fit, flip along. Maybe I'll fool around. Notice that my stroke is black. I'll go to tints and shades. I'll go to tints. I go to hue shift. All right, I go to none. All right, so that's pattern brush 11. So that's your main deal. So is the pattern brush. If I hit leave to strokes, that undoes what I did. Okay, maybe you want to do that. But remember, Command Z is undo, Command Shift Z is redo. I'm hitting apply to strokes. I always like to know what I did. And so that is the brush palette. But again, remember that you can click on a brush and drag it out. So I drag it out of my brush library, just right click and ungroup it. Keep in mind, you can always right click on your screen and come up with menus. And you can always save and open your brush libraries. And of course, you have an icon at the bottom, brush library menu, if you want to go to your menu that way. One last thing I do want to say about this pattern is that the reason it is this odd kind of shape is that I have dashed line checked on. Okay, so you can see that that actually will bring it back into its original shape. So I click on this pattern here. You can see that it sees this pattern here because it lights up. I can play around with the size. Click OK. Apply to strokes. Okay, so you can see that the pattern is unchecked on dashed line. So what is kind of fun is you can actually click on, I'll click on another pattern. I can click on and off on the dashed line, so you can get all kinds of unique looks. I'm going to click on one of the library patterns there, click on and off on the dashed line. All right, so you can always do that. All right, I'll hit Command plus, Command apostrophe for my grid on and off. View snap the grid is on. I'm going to show some more patterns. Command plus magnifies my screen. I'll keep hitting on it till I can go no farther, and then I'll hit Command minus 10 times. 2, 3. All right, so that's a nice level. I'm going to create some horizontal stripes. I will be clicking on my rectangle tool. I will use just a fill color because I don't want a border. Choose any colors you want. I'll drag it horizontally. See, nice and easy. I will hit Command click away deselect because I don't want to get involved with those bounding boxes. Now I'll create another stripe. Command minus a couple times. Space bar with my left hand, or click on the toolbar. So make as many stripes as you want. Again, they have to be the same length here. I'll just do one more stripe. I could add grid lines if I want to make skinnier stripes. It's whatever you want to do. It's very precise. So there you go. I will now go with my rectangle tool. Again, I will click on my screen. I'm going to create a object. There you go. I will now click here and create another color. So I'm just kind of having fun. Whoops, I want that to be the same color. So it's just kind of like a checkerboard. Before I get too far, I'll take my black arrow. I'll select my stripe pattern. You can group it if you want, and I'll drag it into my brush palette. I will click on new pattern brush as usual, click OK. If I want to use U-shift, this is the color that will change. I'm not going to. Click on my middle box, click on auto centered because I want to. Gives it a nice flow there, and I'm clicking OK. I'll do the same thing with the checkerboard. All right, drag it in. Again, it's invisible until you release the mouse. Click on pattern brush, click OK. Back into here, auto centered. All right, if you want to change the size, just play with these dials. I'm going to just leave everything alone, clicking OK. Hitting Command minus, I will just go to any object, maybe the oval tool. So I'm playing with the strokes, so I will click on my brush so you can see I can put a stroke in. So this is the different stuff I'm doing. I can always get rid of my fill color or do whatever I want. Keep in mind these objects can also be dragged into your swatch palette to create repeating patterns. So that's what's kind of cool. So I'm just dragging them in, clicking on my object. My fill is in front. Click on it. So you can do all kinds of very colorful, different types of things. So it's almost unlimited. Okay, this is a knit pattern that I show in one of my classes. That is the advanced brush class, which you're going to see shortly. It's right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plaid. I'll put it into my brush palette. So I will do it really simply. I also do this in my swatch palette class. So I'm now going to create a plaid that I'm going to be putting into my brush palette. Okay, and this is just a really basic plaid. I'm going to use a 1x1 inch box as my guide. I have snapped a grid on, so I'm going to just draw across here and create some stripes. You have to make sure you have snapped a grid on. These have to be the same length. Command plus magnifies it. You can use less grid lines if this gets too complicated. And I'm really going to, notice how I'm starting at the far end. I'm just going to do 3 stripes going this way. If I want, I can group my squares. So this is a perfect square. Even though it doesn't have to be a perfect square, you could do a plaid with a rectangle. I'll hit Command G to group it, or else you can right click to group it, and you can always ungroup it. I'll hit Command minus, and now what I'm going to be doing is creating another square of stripes going in the other direction. I'll be a box or two away. The trick is you have to do the same size box. So I am going to be doing a 1x1 inch box. You can change the colors to whatever you want. I am going to hit Command click away deselect. Again, I'm in the box tool, and I will just create little stripes as usual. Command click away deselect. Again, I'm drawing without a stroke color unless you want borders on it. I am not putting any gradients into anything because there should be an issue with that. All right, so I have 2 of the same size boxes, swatches. I could always drag each one into my swatch and brush palette at this time. I'm going to group my other pattern also. Right click to group it instead of Command G, doesn't matter. Keep in mind you can still change the colors by clicking on the fill color with your white arrow and change the colors. so anything goes. And what I'm going to do is, this is the second object that I drew, so it's above this other object. You can always go object arrange, send to front, send to back, right, if you don't like what is in front or behind. And what I'm going to do, I'll hide the grid temporarily, but I'm going to click on this object here and go to opacity and bring it down to around 50. Could be 50, 60, 40, whatever you really want, but I'll bring it to right about to 50. So now you can see through it. I have snapped a grid on. You can see how it perfectly goes on top of this other object. I will select both my patterns. So I will select both my patterns with my black arrow. I drag around the object. I drag it into my brush, pattern brush. Okay, choose a pattern in here, auto-centered, or maybe auto overlap, whatever. Okay, click OK. And of course, I covered in another class, but I can also drag my pattern into the swatch palette. Okay, so that's the same thing. So the pattern brush and the swatch palette are great for that. I will hit Command minus to minimize my screen so I can see what I did. I will draw a line. I'll just take the pen tool, P for the pen tool, draw a long line because you want to see the repeating pattern. All right, I'll click along here so you can see what I have there. There's checkerboards. Again, double clicking on the pattern. Play around with the scale if you want. Click OK. Apply to strokes. I hate that question. So there is playing around with these patterns. And of course, I can click on my fill here, and there's my plaid inside my fill color. All right, I'll go to my square rectangle tool, make a big square. So there's my pattern. And of course, I can move this pattern around with my tools and objects, and I do have a video on that. So that is a good look at some more patterns in the pattern brush. I'm also going to hit Command apostrophe for my grid. I'll hit Command plus so I can get really close. I am going to click on my pen tool. I'll draw without a fill color, so transparent fill. I'll click on my stroke and bring it forward, making it black just because I want to. Make sure you have snap to grid on. So snap to grid is on. I am going to click on my graph. I'm going to just click and drag down, create a line, or maybe I make it a dash line. Okay, my dash is 2, my gap is 1. And now what I'm going to do is take my black arrow and I'm going to select my stitch or whatever it is. All right, I'm going to click on my reflect tool, right, or O for the reflect tool, and I'll hold down Option or Alt on a PC. I'm going to use this as my center line, so I'm going to click right on this point here. If you have snap to grid on, it should be right on the grid. Mine looks a little off, but it doesn't really matter for this case. So that's going to be my center line. So when I click, you want to say vertical 90 and you hit copy. So there I am reflecting this object. The key is it's going to repeat, but this line here and this line here have to match. You actually could now create whatever you want in the middle of this object because they're not going to be on the edges. So I went to my oval tool and I'm just fooling around doing whatever I want. You can put fill colors, stroke colors. So there is my object and I will select it. I could right click to group it if I want, or Command G groups it. But anyway, I'm going to drag it into my brush palette. I'll click pattern brush, of course, clicking OK. Some designers would use a technique similar to this to create lace or fancy stitches. All right, so I hit Command minus. There's my object. Maybe I'll have a little fun with this and I'll drag it into my swatch palette. All right, so dragging between brush and swatch palettes is fantastic. Command minus to see what's going on. I'll make a huge square or whatever object I want. You can draw a shirt if you want and put this stuff in. I will click on the edge of my brush pattern. All right, now I'll hit Command plus. You can see it looks unusual. It's like, what's going on? Well, I have the dashed line still checked on, so uncheck on that, and there's my repeating pattern. So with a pen tool, I could just draw a line. Maybe this is some type of fancy stitch. Click on the pattern. All right, and of course I can double click on the pattern, play with the sizes, and do what I want. So this is actually a way to create fancy stitches, fancy designs, maybe embroideries, but you can see it's a repeating pattern where these two lines match. So an important thing is Command apostrophe for my grid. Let's say I go into Command plus and I want to create something where I have a bunch of stuff to the left side. All right, so I'm going to my oval tool. I'll just put some colors in, and here's these objects that I have on this side, and I want to put it on the other side. I'm going to take my black arrow. Maybe I go Command K for preferences or click at the top for preferences. Okay, I will now go into guides and grid and make it 2 subdivisions per inch. So where it says subdivision, I make it 2. I click OK. So now here's my square area. All right, that's my pattern area. I can take my black arrow, select these 2 objects, click on my reflect tool, O for the reflect tool. This is going to be my center line right here. All right, I hold down Option, I click on the center line, vertical 90, copy. So if it doesn't default to that, click on that. So now I have a perfect reflection over here. So again, you could do a lace pattern or something on the edge or whatever you want on the edge and then reflect it this way in order to repeat it on the other side. And then do whatever you want in the middle. Maybe I'll go to my star tool and I'll create some kind of a star. I could get rid of snap to grid to do this, don't really care. I will make it a, I can't make it a gradient. At this point, it should not be accepted by the brush palette. So I select everything with the black arrow. I drag it in. I'll click on pattern brush. This is going to be a unique pattern. I will find something here in the auto center, or else if I was really specific, I could create my own pattern. I could draw a line, use a repeating pattern, and create a pattern for that weird thing if that's what I'm doing. Command minus, Command apostrophe, hide the grid. I'll draw a long line. Maybe I'll use the line tool, just click and drag a long line. Click on my pattern and see what happened. All right, so you can see I have symmetry to my pattern. And so that's just an example of creating different things with the pattern brush. It's all kinds of things with that. I also could drag it into my swatch palette just to see what happens. Click on my object, have my fill in front, click on the pattern. All right, so there you see a repeating pattern in here. And it's all kind of crazy. You can see I have patterns within patterns. So my last thing with patterns, at least for this area, is where I show you patterns within patterns. This gets a little complicated, I guess, but I'm going to take the straight line tool and I draw a line. If I hold down shift, it goes completely horizontal, which is fine. It's whatever you want. I will click on the checkerboard. Maybe I'll make my checkerboard slightly bigger. I click OK. Apply to strokes. Now what I'm going to do is go Command C, copy, Command F, paste in front. Command C, copy, Command F, paste in front. That means I have a duplicate line on top of the other line. Okay, you can see that. Command C puts it back. And now I can click on something else. Maybe I'll click on the stripe. So now you can see I have a pattern on top of a pattern. Command C, copy, Command F. So I put another line in. Maybe I'll click on the stitches or whatever they are. Double click on the stitches. I can maybe make them bigger. So experiment with multi-patterns. I could hit leave strokes. Maybe I want something a little different. I won't make them so big. I could always pull this to the side so I can see what I'm doing. I have preview clicked on. I'll make them a little bit smaller. I will click OK. Apply to strokes. Okay, so I got this complicated thing going on. All right, so I have different patterns on top of each other. So that's how you do some really complicated stuff. And now if I really want to see what happens, I select this entire selection of stuff and drag the whole thing into the brush palette. So this is when you play with Illustrator and see what happens. Click OK. All right, I will just click on whatever for that corner piece. I will hit Command minus. Okay, maybe I'll even live it up a little bit and drag the whole thing into my swatch palette. So back and forth, just kind of playing around. I'll take my rectangle tool, or instead of that, I'll go to the rounded rectangle tool. All right, so if I click on this new weird pattern, we'll see what happens. I will double click on it. Maybe nothing major happens. My whole point is that you can experiment and do all kinds of things just to see what happens. I have my fill in front. I'll click on the pattern here. All right, so these are just different designs you can create. Okay, dragging patterns into patterns, dragging multi-patterns on top of each other, or play with opacity to blend in colors. So anyway, that's a lot of stuff you can do with the brush palette.